Man, I am not doing good with the flute tonight, guys.
Don't worry about it. It's the effort.
We'll just call it at that. I'm really off on the flute tonight, and
No
it
problem.
doesn't look like the mic's picking it up too well anyway. So it may.
Splice the version that you did last time in. That was wonderful.
We'll have to do a little editing and post production, but
Ooh.
oh. We just lost James for a minute. He'll be right back, but let me go ahead and start introductions. We have James Flaming Eagle Mooney with us tonight, the co-founder of the Oklevueha Native American Church. We also have Demian Gover, who is the chief minister of the Peaceful Mountain Way branch of the Oklevueha Native American Church, and I am your host, Joshua Big Hempy McGuire, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Reality. Tonight we've got some just more great information that James is going to be laying down on us. If he was here last week, he laid some serious information down on us, and it was just an amazing time, a very blessed episode. Just so much amazing knowledge passed down, and I am excited to have you here again tonight and to get into this episode again. So, James, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay, first of all, I really like to thank Damian and Joshua for bringing this together, and it's really nice. It's nice to see you, Damian. It's been a long, long time, and I've heard nothing but just wonderful things about the work that you guys are doing, and that's what Octave is all about. Apparently, we're pushing. I think we're over a 500,000 people now, and I don't know how many different branches they have, but we're all around the world. We work with people in Manchuria, we work with people in China, we work with people in Africa, United States, Mexico. We're all over the place now, and it's pleasing to my heart, to know that we're doing some things that are really helpful to our societies, and that's so I just want to thank you guys for doing what you're doing and making it known more so than just hearsay per se. And so I want to thank you guys. And just to start off, I'd like
Oh,
to last
thank you.
last time we were together. Uh, I really started from the beginning of the indigenous culture of where ceremonies started, which was, who knows, the beginning of time. Then I talked about the separation of continents and how things migrated back to this particular the center of this continent. It's very interesting when you look at that. And I went over that pretty thoroughly last time, but today I want to talk about. We ended up having Okava, or having the Native American Church incorporated in 1918 by my great grandfather, and there's a couple of things that he expressed. First of all, we talked about that there was a. Well, let's start this way. When Columbus and the Pilgrims got here, they were talking about the indigenous people being savages, okay? And these savages opened their arms to these people and helped them to survive, to be frank with you. And yet we're the savages. And they're the ones that just started murdering our people, capturing them, putting them in slavery and the whole thing. I mean, it was just, so there was basically three atrocities perpetrated upon the indigenous people just about the time that the United States government signed the Constitution. And I talked about the way the Constitution was brought about was with George Washington getting advice from the Iroquois Confederation, a bunch of Indians, because they had learned over a period of time how to take diverse cultures and having them live together in a harmonious way. And they were able to maintain their own languages, these different cultures, and so they developed handwriting or uh,
Si-
sign
sign language.
language.
Sign language,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, they were indigenous. I mean, they were genius when you think about it. And it was all about the. If you really look at the Constitution, it's really saying respect other people's differences. That's it.
Right.
Okay, and so the indigenous people over eons of time, and it just seems like every 500 years there'll be a incredible peace, and then there'll be for 500 years people get, I don't know, caught up in their ego or pride or whatever, I don't, ego, pride, greed or something, and then it just degenerates for about another 500 years. And I personally think we're coming at the end of the 500 years that's been degenerated. If you understand what I'm saying, I think what's going on now is just so evident of how corrupt things have gotten, is what it amounts to.
Right.
And so there have been 3 atrocities that's been perpetrated upon the indigenous people, and I'm primarily looking at the United States, but this has been going on from the beginning of time. But because we're in the United States, the North and South American continents, so I'm just going to leave it there. But the first atrocity that was actually perpetrated and the government supported was extermination order of the indigenous people, where an outright killing of Native Americans were looked upon. Like Sherman, Tecumseh Sherman, coined the statement, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. And if you're on Indian reservations, then which was an unconstitutional move by Andrew Jackson, the United States Supreme Court made a ruling, you can't do this, it's unconstitutional. And basically Andrew Jackson says, screw you, I've got control over the Army, and how in the hell are you going to enforce your ruling when I want to develop the reservation system? And so but the reservation system was it was a system where they gathered everybody together, and then they started giving them smallpox infested blankets. So more Indians died on the reservations of being poisoned than they were by guns. And so then the Indians were realizing, oh my gosh, we're being poisoned. Let's leave the reservations. Then they put a bounty on those people's heads to kill any Indian. For a Seminole, that was $200. Imagine what $200 was in the 1800s. Unfreaking believable.
Oh yeah.
But that's what was going on. In Utah, it was $2 gold pieces. I mean, it was if you're off the Indian reservation, you were dead, supposedly. People got money for it. And so under that extermination order, there's a lot of things happen. And I wanted to cover this. There's the reservation Indians, and then there was the Indians that never got onto reservations. And so the atrocities were utilized, I mean, the negative influence on the Indians that were not on Indian reservations were just about as bad as they were on Indian reservations. Because if you're known to be an Indian off of Indian reservations, it killed you. Okay? And so you had to hide who you were. And you had to, like my people, escaped off of the Trail of Tears around the lower Missouri and Arkansas just before they got into Chicago, or I mean into Oklahoma. It was right on the borderline, and so they escaped from that area, and so they lived up until my grandparents died in fear. If they were known to be an Indian, they were going to get killed. And I mean, and so I was given that idea that I felt really comfortable about being an Indian when I was in high school and doing athletics and everything. But then when I got into a business consulting, the whole idea an Indian was drilled into my mind that the only thing that an Indian was good for was being a drunkard, SOB, and irresponsible and an alcoholic. I mean, just irresponsible, alcoholic,
The
and
stereotypes
dirty.
that Hollywood has portrayed of the Native Americans,
Oh, it was
basically. Yeah.
it was worse than that. My dad, who was just beautiful to me, but who raised me, wasn't my biological father. But he often would say to me that Indians are nothing but just drunkards and totally irresponsible. And so when I became a international business consultant, I don't want anybody think I was an Indian. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Oh yeah.
Because I was conditioned to be ashamed of being an Indian. And so then you had the guys and the people that were on Indian reservations, and they were suppressed like you have no idea. Alcoholism, given poison blankets, and then the foods that they gave to them were just horrible. A lot of Indians died because of the freaking diet, and that they would be given rancid meat, and I mean it was just horrible, and they're still suffering on those tribes. I mean, and then you have the situation is the extermination order. Now, who are the people that refuse to not to honor their heritage? It was the medicine people. So in 1876, when Ulysses S. Grant, under the Dawes Act, it wasn't signed into order until after Ulysses S. Grant, but in the negotiations, they proclaimed that the Rosebud Reservation, its spirituality cannot be separated from the earth, making the earth its temple. Think about the value of that. And when at that time it was all about a migration from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so what do you got going? Oh my gosh! People say, "Well, we can't have those Indians around." Oh my gosh, that we got to start killing them off. And so they started with the medicine people, outlawing anything to do with the medicine, because the medicine people tell their stories, and they're the ones that keep the history going. So it was an onslaught murdering of Indians, but primarily the medicine people. And the last two medicine people that everybody knows about, first was Crazy Horse, and then right after that was Sitting Bull. The last two, and then also Geronimo. He was a medicine person, and so you know what they did with him. And I mean that it's just a horrible story, but it was all about exterminating the entire American Native, killing them off. That's what it was about. Now, that's one. The second atrocity was what they call cultural genocide. Now, how that came about was because the Christian organizations, who were really the ones that wanted to exterminate the Native American culture, was primarily the Catholic Church, Presbyterians, and the Mormons. And the reason for that is because their culture don't believe that another person has a authority to tell you can enter heaven or not. Think about it. The Pope, the prophet of the Mormon Church, if you don't please him, he denies you from getting into heaven or being with your family for life and all eternity. Native American culture is not like that at all. It's like when Quanah Parker, the Comanche, and some of you may or may not know who he was. Incredible guy. But he would often be said, would say that the white man goes into his churches to hear somebody talk about God. We go into our teepee and we talk to God face to face. That put a death warrant on the Native American medicine people from the Christianity people that think that you have to please the prophet or please the Pope. I mean, so and I'm not degrading the Catholic Church. I'm just saying what was. That's
right. And what is
because
ironic?
Every religion. What?
What is ironic about that is that even in Judeo-Christian tradition, they have a long history of murdering their prophets.
Yeah, Okay, and so that's
Jesus,
what.
Jesus, not the
Yeah,
least
prime.
among them, but they have a law.
That's right.
And he told them, he was talking to the Sanhedrin, he was talking to the religious leaders at the time, that you heard the prophets and you killed them. But they're like, oh
Yeah.
no, we listen to the prophets now, we follow their teachings now. And no, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to negate any other religion or anything,
No,
but
no, it's
I'm
not the
just.
religion. It's not the religion that, but you keep mentioning culture. I talk about the same thing all the time. There's not a problem with the religions per se. There's not a
That's
problem
right.
with the scriptures, but
That's right. Absolutely.
there is a problem with the culture.
With administrating their thing. That's right. Well, I don't want to rely on that too much, but this principle has been going on from the from the from history, from the beginning of mankind, of recorded history, that you would start killing off the indigenous people, um, uh, the conquering society or culture would always try to kill off the leadership of the conquered. It
Especially
was
the
just,
spiritual leaders, because that
oh,
is the heart of the people.
that especially indigenous,
Right.
indigenous throughout the
Right.
world. The indigenous belief system of North and South America is no different than Africa's and then Manchuria. There's no difference. It's the same thing, and because it's all about the earth,
Right.
and that's just the way it is. And those people are by and large are extremely peaceful. They're passive. They don't give a hoot about anything, to be frank with you, and they just want to be at one with nature and stuff. And so that's been a real threat to these people. But the Christians realized, oh my gosh, we're killing the children. So we can't kill children. And so they developed these schools, these Indian schools. And that was instituted what they call the second atrocity. And that second atrocity is called cultural genocide, where they put these kids, ripped them from the mother's arms. And sometimes the village would move, get up and move, and put their teepees outside of the schools so they could at least be close to their children. I mean, it was just horrible what was being done. And then they'd cut their hair, and they just said, we'll make a good white man out of a good Christian out of these savage Indians and stuff like that. And that last of those schools ended in 1973 in Ogden, Utah.
Which isn't all that long ago.
That's exactly right. I mean, so that thing really went on. So now we come up to 1918, and I went through the last time, and I'm not going to reiterate, but they came up with a law because after the Wounded Knee Massacre, the Indians, after Wounded Knee Massacre, because they killed Sitting Bull, people back east knew who Sitting Bull was because of the Buffalo Bill Cody's circus, and the two acts that Buffalo Bill had was
Annie Oakley.
Annie
Oakley and Sitting Bull.
and Sitting Bull.
And so they knew Sitting Bull as being this magnificent Indian, magnificent. They loved him. Those are Annie Oakley and him were the best thing that Buffalo Bill Cody had. So then when he was murdered a couple of weeks before the mass murders of the Wounded Knee Massacre, that got back east, and they said, what are we doing? Oh my God, we're killing women and children and Sitting Bull? That's horrible. And so that was the last authorized, condoned murdering of Native Americans. So in some ways that was a horrible thing, but in other ways it was beautiful because no more government-sanctioned murdering of Indians. Now, when that happened, the Indians started doing their ceremonies again, but now they weren't on Indian reservations. They weren't killing them, but they were throwing them into prison. And so it didn't take them very long that the Indians, the Native American medicine people said, hey, if we go off of Indian reservations, they're not going to kill us. So they started doing their ceremonies off of Indian reservations. And when that happened, then these Christians and all these Catholics, the Mormons and the Presbyterians got all ticked off and contacted the Bureau of Indian Affairs, says, you got to stop those Indians from doing the ceremonies off of Indian reservations. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs said, cannot do. They're out of our jurisdiction. So these people, now it's the oil industry, because it's in 1918, they're interested in capitalizing on getting land to do their oil wells in Oklahoma. And then you have the pharmaceutical industry, the clothing industry, because hemp makes the best clothing in the world. They don't want the native. They don't want the Native American culture to start experiencing its civil rights and civil liberties. So they devised a law to outlaw the entire American Native culture. And it was called the Peyote Law. And as I said last time, the peyote, they called it the Peyote Laws because peyote was utilized on the trading routes from Peru all the way up to Alaska. It was the most valuable of all of the sacraments, of all the commodities that was on the trading routes, was the peyote, because they used peyote in every ceremony that they used. And so they called it the Peyote Law, okay? And it was to outlaw peyote, but as in reality, it was to outlaw the entire American Native culture. Well, my grandfather, who was a Smithsonian Institute ethnologist, and some of his other friends argued against that to the Senate. And that law actually passed the House of Representatives in 1918. And so my grandfather did an argument, and the Senate used my grandfather's argument and killed the bill. Then my grandfather went to the Oklahoma Indians and said, you know, we won this battle, but there is so much at stake for these people that it's not going to stop. They're going to come up with something again. The only way we're going to be able to save your culture in the long run is by incorporating you as a church, incorporating your culture as the Native American Church. So he wrote the bylaws, and then he incorporated the first Native American Church in 1918. And that's when, after that was done, then he went back to the Indians. He says, this is going to save your culture in the long run. But there is so much at stake that they're going to prevent you from having your full civil liberties, and they're going to convince everybody, all the Congress and all of the departments of the federal government, that the only way you can practice this religion is if you're on Indian reservations, where the Bureau of Indian Affairs can keep a cap on your abilities to experience your civil liberties.
Right.
Okay, so in 1918, when my grandfather won that law, and then he advised it, he said, that is going to happen. You're going to be able to save it in the long run, but it's going to be a while. Well, it took about 100 years until my wife and I stood in front of the Utah Supreme Court and got a unanimous decision saying you don't have to be part of a federally recognized tribe and be an Indian to practice the religion. What they pulled off for almost 100 years, that in order to practice the Roman Catholic religion, you had to be a citizen of Rome or of Italy and been born in Italy. You had to be an Italian to practice the Roman Catholic religion. They pulled that off for almost 100 years, making a political and a racial issue on to be able to practice your religion. And so, of course, the Utah Supreme Court ruled unanimously that can't be done. That's just silly. Okay? So, what happened in 1918, the third atrocity was introduced. That third atrocity was the denial of the Native American Church or the Native American culture in experiencing its civil liberties. Think about how many people have been thrown in prison. How many people, the damage that has been done to our culture because the government would not recognize us as a church.
Right, you couldn't even do marriage ceremonies in a traditional Native way. They wouldn't
Absolutely.
recognize them, and they even hold those ceremonies was criminal, and you could be arrested and thrown
Criminal.
in prison for it.
It's a federal offense.
Yeah, just to get
They
married in a traditional Native ceremony. N- nothing, nothing as far as any of the issue of the sacraments and stuff being involved. It was just because it was a ceremony done in a traditional style.
any ceremony, whether it was a sacred prayer pipe, a sweat lodge, it was a felony to do a sweat lodge off of Indian reservations. They pulled that off. They pulled that off. So those are three significant things you got to think about. Is the first one is extermination order. The second was the cultural genocide. And the third one was the denial of your civil liberties. And we're just beginning, like I said, the cultural genocide, or the extermination order ended in December the 30th, 1980. And the cultural genocide ended in 1973. Now, our civil liberties should have ended in 2005 when Linda and I stood up in front of the Utah Supreme Court and we got that unanimous ruling. And remember, that unanimous ruling was actually a federal ruling because the state of Utah basically made the ruling off of federal law. So it's undisputable, if you understand what I'm saying to you.
Right.
Okay, but we have a person right now in Hawaii that's in prison because they inappropriately, illegally raided his church. You don't have the rights to step on their property unless think about it for a moment. Just think about this. The Rattlesnake Baptist Christian Church, okay? They have people dying all the time,
Right.
okay? They can't stop it. Government cannot legislate a religious movement. Do you get that?
Oh,
They
yeah.
can't legislate it or do anything.
I was going to say that actually goes into an article that Demian passed over to me this week that I read about where the DEA is trying to say that they have the right to say what can be used sacramentally and what can't.
And they don't.
And they don't have any jurisdiction there. They don't have any jurisdiction there. There's
None.
a separation of church and state for a reason, and that is so the government cannot tell us what we can do in our own spirituality. That is the reason why the Puritans left the Church of England originally and came to the United States and founded what we now know as the United States of America, was because of that religious oppression, and that's why the freedom of religion and the freedom of speech was written into the Constitution of the United States of America. It's because
That's exactly
they didn't
right.
want to be put under that same kind of oppression that they themselves are now trying to oppress upon the Native American culture and communities.
Okay, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
So in that article, it talks specifically about the Controlled Substances Act, and it specifically says that what the DEA has authority over are things like medical research, those types of things. It does not have anything to do with religion. So anytime the DEA
absolutely, and you got Damian, all you have to do is when you're talking to these people, just refer them back to the UDV, Utah United States Supreme Court, where they were doing ayahuasca Jeff
Mm-hmm.
Rothman, who's a friend of mine, he Jeffrey, when he won his United States Supreme Court ruling, he called me. He says, James, I should have done it under the Native American Church. It would have saved me a couple $1,000,000. But so anything that a church considers it's a sacrament, the government's got. I could make it chewing gum, and it doesn't make any. They have no rights to do anything like that. Okay, they're just totally off of their limit. And because we're a sovereign nation, it's like going into Mexico and telling them what they ought to be doing and what they should not be doing. It's the same. You're a sovereign nation.
It's really strange to me because there are some people who are, you can only identify them as legalists, that they think that the reason the UDV or the Santa Daime, that it's legal is because of that DEA exemption. And first of all, obviously that's not true. They received that exemption because the DEA was basically trying to save face, and they felt like they had to do something to legitimize this these completely inappropriate and unconstitutional lawsuits.
Well, what you do, all you need to do, Demian, is just pull up the ruling on Oklevueha Native American Church. You see, in Utah, there was three people or three organizations that were indicted: James and Linda Mooney and Oklevueha Native American Church. They were trying to outlaw the Oklevueha Native American Church, and they blew it. They should never have done that, but they did. And so now all you have to do, and it's very clear that there's no discussion on any type of sacrament or whatnot. The government has absolutely no legal authority to tell you what to do or how you do it or anything.
And I hear people, people ask me these questions all the time. Fortunately, we haven't been presented, with even that issue legally.
Yeah.
I think we've been very fortunate. But I think any American, it should chill the blood, the very idea that you should have to have a government stamp of approval to practice religion.
Well, it's not that way, and so and some of these people are still blinded to that fact. Yeah.
I think you guys know what I'm holding right here. Both of you do.
Yeah.
Mind if I read off the back of this card so people know exactly what it says?
Sure, go ahead.
For those of you who don't know, this is my membership card to the Oklevueha Native American Church for the Peaceful Mountain Way branch. I am under the leadership of both of these gentlemen right here, which I am very honored and proud to be under their guidance, and they're both mentors to me, and I'm very proud of being part of this. But the back of this church says, the person secured with this card has met the standard of sincerity to be a member of the Oklevueha Native American Church. Being a member of the ONAC qualifies this cardholder to carry and or possess Native American Church sacraments, including but not limited to peyote, ayahuasca, cannabis, psilocybin mushroom, and fungi, etc. Laws pertaining to the protection of all ONAC medicine persons and members' civil liberties are outlined in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights of the United States Constitution, and more specifically described in the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000.
Just pure and clear.
And
they can't touch them.
So what that means is that you can say, okay, these are controlled substances for a reason. They have powerful effects on the mind and body. But what it's saying is that as a church, as a religious and spiritual institution, we're making the decision ourselves that we're not going to use these things haphazardly or with irresponsibly, but it's not anyone else's call to say that these are things that need to be used responsibly. That's our call.
Yeah, that's right, Damon. But what it is our call, But that's the reason we have a council of advisors, because they vet people and they are thorough. And Damon, you know what I'm
Oh,
talking about.
I know. I've been through the process.
And not only are they very thorough, but once you are given that honor to be a branch, they watch over you to make sure you're following those principles. Am I right, Damian?
That is correct.
Oh
And
yeah.
I've had many many wonderful conversations with Lone Buck.
Oh yeah, Lombok. He's the sergeant of arms.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're right on and doing what you committed on doing, it is beautiful. But if you step out of line one iota, they are on you like you have no idea. I,
Yeah,
and
we even brought this up a little bit in the last conversation where I brought up one of the churches out in California that I knew of, a branch that had started out there. They was working under the guides of a cannabis church, but they wasn't staying within the code of ethics. They wasn't obeying our laws and bylaws that we have that hold us to a certain standard, and they was trying to use the protections of the Native
yeah,
American Church
yeah,
basically to more or less run their own little cartel per se. And
that's exactly right.
and I'm pretty sure you probably know the exact branch and the people involved and stuff that was going on. There's no need to name names
Yeah.
unless anyone wants to. That's on you guys, not my end.
Well,
But the church had no problems yanking their charter and shutting them down as soon as they was made aware of these violations and the code of ethics and stuff and how they were operating.
yeah, and I understand within 2 weeks they were all arrested, and their branches were raided.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
all those branches
the,
were raided.
yeah, and so you don't want to mess with those people. And what you want to do is abide by the code of ethics and the principles that are outlined that they thoroughly go over with you, and you abide by that. You're going to be a happy camper, and it's going to be really nice and beautiful because they promote you, they send people to you, they do. It's unlimited on the blessings that will be given to you. But with that, here's how powerful that really is. Right now, as you and I, the three of us, are sitting here,
The
yeah,
binder of the
that's
code
it.
of ethics, I keep it right by me at all times whenever we're
That's
working
right.
on things.
So what happens now? You just think about it. As you and I are sitting here right now, the three of us, and the people that are listening, Oklevueha Native American Church is the only Native American church accepted by the United States government to be able to conduct peyote ceremonies for the United States Navy. We're the only Native American church that the government recognizes us to do our Native American church ceremonies for the Veteran Administration's hospitals. We're the only Native American church that has a proclamation signed by the consulate of Mexico to exchange our medicines and traditions with the Huicholes of Mexico. No other Native American church has that. All other Native American churches are sovereign nations on their Indian reservations. Do you get the difference?
They have to operate on the reservations where we are allowed to operate anywhere.
Anywhere. That's right. And we can operate on Indian reservations. We do. On Indian reservations, we got people on Indian reservations conducting peyote ceremonies, ayahuasca ceremony, everything, right? And cannabis, everything. And there's special classes that we have. Or if people want to learn how to do ayahuasca, we've got a number of great that can be trained and to start conducting ceremonies with ayahuasca. And as I had a conversation with a few of the counselors just the other day, I said, guys, my major concern is the children. it's a protection of the children. When I worked in the prison system for about 10 years, I was a counselor. And when I went in that prison system as a counselor, I said to my wife, Linda, I said, sweetheart, I believe every person I work with, or 60% of the people I work with, are merely going to be acting out what was done to them when they were kids.
Right.
After 10 years, it's 100%. So the solution to the anxiety of our culture is to protect those children. And in order to protect those children, we got to heal the parents. And that's what's going on now. And that's the reason, Demian, I want you to have at least 20 people that you've trained to do things under the principles of that outline, so that we can start, we have a mass exodus of medicine people healing this culture, so that we can start raising these children, these beautiful spirits that are coming in this world, and they're safe. They're not going to be screwed around with.
James, that actually brings in a point. Someone just asked a question in chat, and I think this is a good point to ask this, because you just mentioned about training medicine men and women to come up to be able to take these healing sacraments out to others, so we can start healing in mass amounts, so we can really get out there and start working with people. And I've talked with Demian, and I've expressed my my desire to do exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
And not just to become ordained as a minister within the church, but actually I want to take the steps to go through and get blessed by the church and vetted by the governing council as a medicine man, so I can carry these sacraments out to other people and work with them when and where needed, just like what Demian does. But a member of the Peaceful Mountain Way is in the chat and asked the question. It's Dave. He's always here with us. He said, I'd like to hear about experience a calling, and what does it mean, and how should one respond? So I think that means if you're getting that calling to step forward, to take those steps, to go down that path.
Very
Okay.
simply,
So I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to spend the rest of the time that we have on that precisely.
Okay.
Okay. And if you really want to get verification of what I'm going to be telling you and sharing with you, just go to our website and look up James Mooney. And one of the pictures, when you information about Oklevueha, and you'll see a picture of myself and oh my goodness gracious, Richard Swallow, who is a Lakota Sioux. And if you just hit James Mooney, it'll bring up my whole story. Now, that story was confirmed to be true by the United States Attorney General's office, because they did a whole took 6 months to verify my story. Okay? And so everything on that has been vetted by the United States government. And so I suggest for people, because I don't like people to just take my word for things. I always say you ought to be praying about it, because don't believe any two-legged, because that two-legged may lie.
Right.
Just always go to the Spirit to get confirmation. But if you wanted more confirmation about what I've said, other than just your prayer in the Spirit, then you go to the website, look James up, because the stories I'm going to be talking about now are all there too. Okay? And there's about 9 different separate stories about how I developed into being a medicine person. Okay? So let's start with this particular thing. I've described the atrocities. I described that we won the Utah Supreme Court. So I'm going to go back about 5 years, okay, from the Utah about almost 10 years from the Utah Supreme Court ruling, okay. I I had no idea in my adult years that I was an Indian. Okay, as I said to you, when I was a teenager, yeah, I liked it. But when I became an international business consultant, man, I didn't want nothing to do with Indians. Nothing. Okay, and so um, in about 1987, I had a wife that died, and I was bipolar, manic depressant. I had been hospitalized, taking 1,800 milligrams of lithium a day, and I mean, I was one sick guy. My wife dies, and then because of my illness, being so out of balance, that people thought my wife's deceased wife's family thought that, maybe he's too dangerous because of this bipolar, which I think, as I look back on it, I think it was probably true. But at the time, man, I did not like it. So when all my custody rights were taken away, I and my wife had just died. I was a mess, bipolar, manic depressant, or whatnot. Well, I all of a sudden I'm unable to work. I was doing seminars for. I mean, I've been in front of almost 100,000 people. Okay, doing things. Okay, the Hip Fest. I was in 250,000 people doing a prayer there. I mean, in Seattle, Washington, and stuff. So I mean, I know how to be in front of a large group. And I was in an international business consultant, worked with a multitude of different countries, England, Japan, Korea, mafia. I worked with all of these different people, okay? And but I was really sick, and I could hardly do anything. And these people, just before I really, I remember they carried me, literally carried me, dressed me, and carried me. I did my last two things I did was in Las Vegas and Reno, and I was just a basket case. And I pulled off those two things. When I got in front of people, I was okay, but then they had to escort me up to my room because I was just not a functioning human being. And so after that Reno thing, I was just progressively getting worse. I was on 1,800 milligrams of lithium, and they just said, there's not much else we can do for you. Okay. And I've been hospitalized for about five different times as it was. Well, anyway, this lady named Linda Stone, who was wanting to promote me and do my seminars in these large convention centers and everything, I was staying at her house. She gave me a room, and I'm laying on the floor, and she gave me a telephone right next to my bed, and it rings early in the morning, and I pick it up, and I said hello, and this beautiful Southern accent woman's voice says, "Is this James Mooney?" And this is about 6 o'clock in the morning. And I says, "Yeah, it's still dark outside." And I says, "Yes, it is, James Mooney." And he says, "Is it James Warren Mooney?" And I says, "Yes, it is." She said, "Welcome home. We have found you." They had been searching for me over 20 years. And the reason being is because I was a direct descendant of Osceola, the war chief for the Seminoles, and direct descendant of James Mooney, who's considered to be the person that saved the Native American culture. And they wanted that lineage to become her tribal council wanted to get federally recognized. She didn't want to, but the council wanted her to. And so she decided, okay, if we're going to do that, we need to find James Mooney, because my grandparents, during green corn ceremony, they would attend the green corn ceremony once a year, and they told them about this James Mooney, who was almost killed by these kids by drowning him, and because he was an Indian, and so my grandmother, after that incident, called my mother, and then my mother came and picked me up because my life was in danger because of who I was, and my father, or the man that raised me, Walt Perkins, my mother had him take a train all the way to Missouri to pick me up, and my grandmother made my father, or my the father, the Walt. I consider him my father.
Right.
My biological father was 101st Airborne and was in Normandy, and he was part of those groups of guys that almost got wiped out in the back. And so he was just decimated. He wasn't killed, but he just stood, and my mother had divorced him. And so my grandmother said, "You cannot adopt him." And up to my dad's dying day, or Walt's day, he said, "Why I never adopted you? I don't understand why I never adopted you." And that's because he forgot my grandmother told him, "You cannot adopt him, but you have to have him go by Perkins, because we don't want people to know where he is, because there was a hit out on for me because of my heritage." And so I was raised under the name of Perkins. And so nobody, but my dad, and she said, "Don't you let him forget who he is." And so my dad is an artist, and he made a beautiful painting above my bed. It covered the whole wall of these Indians with bow and arrows shooting buffalo. And then he took up archery. It became very good. And but he had this attitude that Indians were just drunkards and all that other kind of stuff, you know. But he did keep my Indian heritage alive in me. But he also discouraged me, because he said Indians are nothing but lazy bums and alcoholics, you know. And so when I got into the business world, I didn't want that image on me at all. And so I ran from the idea that I was an Indian. Okay. So what happened is that in 1969, I happened to be in a hospital. It was during Vietnam. Okay. And I was transferred to what the heck's the name of Tripler Hospitals, Peak Hospital up on the beautiful hospital, and I was in and out of hospitals because of bipolar or whatever. Anyway, I was in and out of hospitals, but then I got out of the hospitals and I applied for 5 different jobs, and I took this one job with a hotel chain. It was a Japanese chain, okay, and I helped to open up that hotel. Actually, I opened up 2 hotels in Hawaii. One called the Makaha Indian Country Club, and the other one was this Queen Capulani. Well, when I took this very prestigious position, they had to do an abstract on me, check my background, and I told them I was Jim Perkins. And they said, "We got no record of Jim Perkins." I said, "Well, no, I've been going by Jim Perkins, but my real name is James Mooney." And they said, "You need to take one of those 2 names, you know, because you would be a security risk. We can't pass you into the." So I took back my real name, James Mooney. That was in 1969. If I had not have done that, Chief Little Dove would have never found me. Because my grandparents, ever since that incident in Missouri, went back to the green corn ceremony in secret and told my tribe that there was this James Mooney. And but we don't know where he is what it amounts to. And so they had been looking for me for 20 years, is what she told me. Well, anyway, so I was a Mormon at that time, or at that time that I was so sick and my wife died. And so I wanted to get custody of my children or maintain custody of my children. So I applied for the Indian Welfare Act. Okay. And my tribe was willing to go ahead and do that and take my whole thing, but political things stepped in. And so that didn't happen. So I lost the custody of my children. But that's the reason she knew. She contacted the Mormon Genealogy Center and asked if you knew about this James Mooney. And that's how she got my phone number and how they found me after 20 years. So I told her how sick I was. I told her about losing the custody of my children. And she said, well, we can fix the thing about the children. We'll go under the Indian Welfare Act. And then she said on this bipolar thing, they got a medicine out there, Wes, that will probably take care of that bipolar. And I said, well, what is that? And she said, peyote. So I went to the library and I looked up everything I could find on peyote. And I found this one peyote book. It had silver lettering on it. And it said peyote. Opened it up and I read through the whole thing. And it talked about a roadman named Clifford White Buffalo Man Jake in Cedar City in Utah. That he was one of the premier roadmen for peyote. So I went searching for him.
James, can I stop you there for a second? Can you explain what a roadman is to some people who may not know? They may not know that term.
Okay, roadman, in most of the Native American Church teepee ceremonies, they have an altar. It's in the shape of a crescent moon. And in the middle of that altar, they put a line around it. It goes through the whole thing. It's a crescent moon. It's about this thick at the thick end, and then it tapers down to real small at the end. And the fire is the coals are pushed up into that altar and whatnot. Well, on top of that altar, there's a line, and that's called the road of life. So the roadman is a person that teaches you, gives you, is the director of you on the road of life, or he's directing the ceremony of that peyote. So it's his responsibility to keep you safe, is what it amounts to. So that's a roadman, is a person of the NAC, Native American Church tradition, that started in 1918 and was actually initially developed by Quannon Parker, but he died about 10 years before 1918. And so he did not see it, but he was the inspirer. And he developed the teepee ceremony with the crescent moon. And there's different kinds, some called cross moon. They put a Bible in there. And then some call it a full moon. There's different styles of that. But the roadman is pretty consistent. It's about having that line going across. And the roadman teaches you the road of life. Plus, he's on the road all the time because he doesn't do things in one place.
Right, they're a traveling medicine man as well.
Yeah. So he's a roadman. So there's a multitude of meanings to the roadman. Okay. Anyway, that's who Clifford was, and he was really well known and very predominant because he was the DEA agent. It was in that book. Said that he investigated and wanted to bust him, but he found out he was so sincere, and he was a Native American, and he belonged to an Indian tribe. And so the DEA agent wrote him a letter apologizing for being undercover and being, it was really sweet when you really think about it. And anyway, so I said, oh, this guy's bona fide. And so then, and knowing that I'm an Indian, I figured it was okay. All right. So I ended up meeting Clifford, and for 10 years, I'll never forget it. I went to him after I realized I no longer had to take any lithium at all, and I went to him thanking him for curing me of this disease that it's not supposed to be curable. And I said, we got to take this to the white man. He said, no way. I am not going to take that to the white man. And I said, why not? And he says, I hate those people, what they've done to us. And it really kind of shocked me, to be frank with you, because he's always so nice to me. Even though every once in a while when I was displeasing him, he'd call me a half-breed or he'd call me a white man. And then when he saw that it hurt my feelings, he says, James, you got to know something. If you just got the slightest amount of Indian blood in you, it's enough to corrupt your whole system. That was like he's trying to say, it's okay for being part white, James, so don't be. Anyway, he was really something. I mean, he was very kind, very loving, but boy, there are certain things he would just be really livid on. And then he said something when he realized I was hurt and I wanted to take it to the white people. He says, James, listen, you know I work with white people. But if I made it known that I worked with a lot of white people, the Indians would kill me. His other medicine people would kill him. But I will train you, and you can take it to the white man. But if you do, this is what's going to happen. The white man will throw you in his jail, and the Indians will try to kill you. And boy, was he right with that. He was really white. So I started the training, okay? And then Chief Little Dove, she started training me. So I had these two people training me. And Clifford Jake opened the door for me to go and visit with the Huicholes when Jeffrey Brofman, UDV, how I met Jeff is for 5 years before Columbus Day or whatever it was, some anniversary of Columbus. For 5 years, he would go and gather about up to 500 medicine people from indigenous medicine people from around the world and bring them to one isolated place so they could share their medicines with each other. Okay, Jeffrey's emissary invited Clifford Jake to them. Clifford said, no, I want you to take James. And so that's how I got to know Jeff and how I was able to be taught by all these unbelievable indigenous people. Couldn't speak their language. I mean, they had every kind of medicine you could possibly think. It was all about sharing each other's medicine. And not saying one medicine is better than another. None of that nonsense. It was just, it was those times living with those people, and then that's what we did. It was just unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable. Okay, and I mean, I could go on forever on talking to you about what I learned, but that's how Clifford took me under his wing to deal with that. Then I went to Clifford after a while. I said, Clifford, do I need some kind of a Native American Church card and something? And he looked at me and he said, you stay right here. He walked into his bedroom. He came back out. He said, give me your hand. I put my hand out. He put a peyote button in my hand. He says, get the hell out of here.
Now, was that the mother plant that the church has had for a long time?
Well, it's just a peyote button. It's what it was. Yeah. But he would just say, because the tradition basically is if you've been in a peyote ceremony and you have an eagle feather, you cannot be denied going into a Native American Church ceremony. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't know. But that's what was told to me by him, and that was his tradition. If you have an eagle feather and you've already been with the peyote, you're always welcome into a teepee. And I've never been refused myself. And I've literally, I can't even begin to tell you how many ceremonies I've been in. But anyway, that was the start of me, okay? So I started working in the prison system, all right? And I became known, and people knew I was peyote, all right? And one of the prisoners happened to be a Navajo kid. And his mother was a secretary of the North American Native American Church branch out of Salt Lake City. And she was visiting him one time, and I had a call and asked if I would go to the visiting room. And so I did, and I met his mother, and I said, it's nice, and she said, I understand you're peyote. I says, yeah, and who's the roadman? I says, Clifford Jake. Oh, yeah, we know Clifford. And And would you like a Native American Church card? I said, I don't really think I need one. You know, I don't care. She said, do you have your tribal card? I said, yeah. And so she says, can I get a copy of it? And so I said, yeah. And so about a month later, she comes in for a visit again, and here I am. I'm now a member of the North American Native American Church of Salt Lake City. Okay. Now, I never attended anything because I was conducting peyote ceremonies already, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
And
You was called by spirit, not by some card that someone gave you.
yeah. That's exactly right. But that's not to discredit their cards or anything like that.
Right.
But
there's a lot of validity behind that card and having.
Oh, hell
that,
yes.
Just like the one I showed for us.
Exactly right.
It holds a lot of clout.
And I got to tell you, there's not one roadman I ever met that I did not admire and respect. They're all, or everyone, were unbelievable. But there's an organization. It's called NARF, Native American Rights Fund. And they control, from a legal fund, they control the North American Native American Church that practices on Indian reservations. And they have the ear of the tribal government. And the tribal government has an ear to NARF, and NARF is telling them, you got to destroy that Native American church. You heard about Wounded Knee standoff in 1973? Where AIM, American Indian Rights, or American Indian Movement, AIM, you ever hear of that?
I haven't, so this is going to be new information for me. I'm willing to learn.
Okay, 1973, Pine Ridge Indian Reservation government was killing off more Indians, Indian medicine people, and there's it's still going on. Think about it. We as private citizens or churches off of Indian reservations had to supply the Navajo and the Hopis because their government wouldn't supply them with any help during this pandemic. So we had to supply it because they're still denying the Native American culture, the people that live in their culture, any kind of benefits, trying to kill them off. Still, just blows me away, the corruption. It's just unbelievable. Well, anyway, so 1973, AIM came about with some Vietnam vets and whatnot, and came to the aid of the medicine people on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and because they were killing the medicine people. Well, anyway, there was a standoff because the medicine people, or the tribal and AIM, camped out on Wounded Knee, their most sacred area. Well, the tribal government called in the army, or the federal government, and Indians got killed. A couple FBI guys got killed. Peltier is in prison, supposedly for killing which is not true, but it was a political thing. He's still in prison. But that was called the 1973 Wounded Knee standoff. So when that happened, the different elements that want to control the Native American Church developed an off the Indian reservation, because they have control of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and that organization is called NARF, Native American Rights Fund. And they advise the legalities, and the government ended up using them as supporting their racial discrimination thing. And so when Linda and I stood up against Utah, and then eventually the United States government too, but the NARF, with all of its influence, did an amicus brief. You know what an amicus brief is?
Mm-mm. No.
It's a document that a bunch of lawyers or other people that are experts in a particular area give to a court. It's called
Okay.
an amicus brief. Okay, the amicus brief tried to deny or say that I was an Indian, saying I wasn't, I was a phony, and trying to discredit the laws that support, because they're the actual person that the government goes to say who can and who cannot be a member of the Native American Church. Well, they put an amicus brief to the Utah Supreme Court, and the Utah Supreme Court said, "Get out of here. Who do you think you are?" And just eliminated that. And so NARF is the one that controls all of the Native American churches on Indian reservations.
Okay.
Okay, and they put out a thing and saying that James Mooney and Oklevueha is an illegitimate Native American church. I mean, it's all hogwash. It's all propaganda BS.
Right.
But nevertheless,
I've seen some of that. I've seen some of the articles and stuff when I
Yeah.
looked into everything and stuff. And before I joined the church, I'd done a lot of research into it. I spent a lot of time looking into it, and same knowing that I was going to join the Peaceful Mountain Way branch for those. Part of the reason was one, I wanted to join the Native American Church because it falls in line with my spiritual beliefs, and also I was looking at working with some sacraments, including ayahuasca at that point in time, which the Peaceful Mountain Way is an ayahuasca branch, and I was wanting to get into working with it, and I spent some time talking with Demian and really researching in, and not just listening to what he said, but I went and I studied, like you did when they said, hey, peyote's what you need to help heal you. You went looking and researching and
you better
grabbing
believe I
everything.
did.
And,
You
and I
got to
and
be.
I did the same thing with ayahuasca.
Yeah, and that's the way to be done. And the thing is, everything I know, and in my face-to-face experience with Damien, and from what I know about the council of advisors, Damien is top rate,
Oh yeah,
top
he
rate,
uh, uh,
top rate.
like I told
Well,
you,
thank you.
as far as going through everything on the ministerial exam, and that's just to get ordained as a minister within the church. That doesn't mean that I'm a medicine man. It doesn't mean I'm a facilitator or anything along those lines. All
Yeah,
that
we do
stuff,
things in steps. We
right?
do things in layers.
And
No, that's it. So you're gonna need to feel really comfortable about who you're dealing with there. It just is a really good thing. But anyway, that's who NARF is. Okay, and so what happened is Clifford Jake started training me, and then I became. Guys, you got to know if anybody's made any mistakes in these ways, it's me, and I'm not going to go into how stupid I was all the way. Okay, and before Clifford gave me his shortly before he died, he gave me his cedar bag. That was 10 years, and that was telling me in his mind that okay, man, go do it. Okay, but I have been blessed not just by Clifford, but the Guadalupe from the Huicholi people in Mexico, who are really the caretakers of the peyote. She came up here, and these stories on the website there too. And she came up and blessed me to take this medicine to the people of the United States. And then when I ran into trouble, when all these Indians were threatening to kill me, but then they threatened to kill my entire family. Uh, then I don't know, I think it was Salvador or Clifford said I need to get a blessing from Leslie Fulbull up in the Rosebud Reservation,
that's the
and
Lakota Sioux.
that's right. And he said there's no other Indian reservation like this. This is the most powerful roadman in the Native American culture, in the church, in the country. And it was Leslie Fulbull. Because of that blessing or because of that stipulation that it is no other Indian reservation has that stipulation in there. And the reason they put that stipulation in there was because of Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. They thought that would appease them to sign the document, but it didn't because they wanted anyway. They were killed because they wouldn't sign it. Is what
Right.
I'm on to. So Anyway, so I rushed up to South Dakota and the Rosebud Reservation, and Leslie wasn't there. He was in a hospital in Rapid City. So now I got to travel another 2 or 3 hours on the road. I've already been on the road for about 15, 16 hours. I mean, and so I walk into the hospital. It's on the 3rd floor. Mind you, he knows nothing about me. I just didn't even know, I didn't even know his name until 2 days prior. I found out he was on the 3rd floor of the hospital, Rapid City. I walked up, I came to the doorway, and the door was open, and I could see about 12 or 15 people, family members. It was a kind of a jovial type of a thing. And he's in bed, and I'm just standing there, and all of a sudden he looks at me. And he said to me, he says, "You need my help, don't you?" What did he... I mean, give me a freaking break. You know, and he said, "You better come over here." And so I came over there, and I was a little bit more knowledgeable about the traditions and stuff. So I brought him about maybe 100 or so bag of peyote buttons. He knew what it was immediately. He put it over his heart, and he started sobbing with appreciation. I had never experienced anything like that in my life.
You just gave him one of the most sacred gifts that you could give him.
That's what he was telling me.
Yeah.
And he just sobbed. I literally sobbed with appreciation of that peyote. And I was stunned because in my entire life, I had never experienced anything like that in my life. And I was just stunned. And then he looked up at me and he said, we better get you taken care of. And so he gives me his blessing in Lakota Sioux. After he's finished with it, he looks at me and he says, "You didn't understand a word I said, did you?" I said, "No, I didn't, Leslie. No, I didn't." Holding that peyote to his heart, with his other hand, pulled me over, got to my face to face, and he said to me, "You take this medicine to the white man, James." Now, at first hearing that,
Nope, James, we lost your at least video.
yeah, no, it's okay, I'll get rid of this.
Oh, we lost him altogether.
That's really moving.
Oh yes, it very much is. Let me message James over here. Actually, let me just send him back an invite. Oh, there, we got him back already.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, I'm sorry, guys.
No problem. Not a problem at all.
So, anyway, I got to explain to you what that statement was by Leslie Faubourg.
Oh, please do.
Leslie Faubourg is basically demanding me to take the most precious thing in his life to the very descendants of people that murdered his people.
Yeah. He knew it was needed for their healing.
That's called forgiveness, man.
Oh, of the utmost level.
I have never, those two incidences of that humility and that expression of forgiveness or something. And like I said, that story is on the website.
And now it's on here.
Yeah. I it just I still think about that. It's just like it just happened just a few moments ago. He's passed over, and what was so interesting is that I ended up getting back to home in Utah, and about a day after, or 2 days after, his son gives me a call, Willard, and he says, "My dad wants to meet your wife." So I ended up turning back around, driving up, or no, yeah, we drove up, and he was in a clinic in the Rosebud Reservation this time, and he blessed my wife with the same thing. And we left, and then I got back home, and within 3 or 4 days, uh, Willard called me again and said, "James, my dad passed over, and he wanted me to have you sit in a place of honor in the teepee at his funeral."
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so in all reality, I've been blessed by 3 different incredible medicine people to take these medicines to the white man. So here I am doing ceremonies, and now I got this Native American Church card from Salt Lake City, okay? And I've never even been to a meeting of theirs. I just had the card, and I'm doing my own thing. Okay, I'm doing a ceremony up in Ogden, and I get a phone call after the ceremony, and I'm beat tired, and they asked me, it's on a Saturday, and they said to me, "Jay, or the call is, we're having a Native American Church meeting with all the elders. We'd like you to be down here." I said, "Okay, I'll be there." Okay, and so I walked in. I know nobody. I've never done anything with these people. This is about a year after they'd given me this card. And all of a sudden, this woman talks about my grandfather. Okay, they knew my history of who I was. Most Indians know about James Mooney, my great grandfather. And then they just said, "We have an opening for vice president of this branch, and we'd like to have you take on that responsibility." And I don't know anything about what's going on here. And he said, "Are you willing to do that?" I said, "Well, I can't really say no, because my tribal chief says if somebody asks me to do something to help them out or whatever, I got to say yes. I cannot deny that."
Right.
And so I said, "Yeah, okay." And so I was voted in 100% with about 40 or 50 people to be the vice president of this Native American church. And so I started buying all the peyote for the North American Native American Church. And I was traveling down to Mexico. I met Salvador Johnson, and who's the major distributor, and still is the major distributor in Texas for peyote. And so I got to know Salvador really, really well and whatnot. And then after about 6 or 7 months, I get this letter from the president of the North American Native American Church, the international or the tribal, and demanding me to give him the names of all of the white people or non-federally recognized Indians that I'm working with, so they can have them arrested. I said, "What?" I couldn't believe this, and I read the letter, and I couldn't believe my ear. I couldn't believe what I was reading. And so I called Salvador, and I said, "Salvador, I got this letter," and I read it to him. And he says, I said, "If I were to open up a Native American church, would you sell peyote to me?" And he said to me, these are his direct words, James, I would sell peyote to you before I would the North American Native American Church. So he, with the assistance of the Texas person in charge of the peyote in who's actually controlled by the DEA, they signed me up and walked me through on becoming a Native American church. So shortly, I'm just, after the letter, I didn't want to have anything to do with that North American Native American Church. And so they wrote me a letter about 3 months after I had this Oklevueha Native American Church, saying that, you've got a Native American church, and if you don't dissolve that, we would like you to give us a letter of resignation. And I said, not a problem. So I immediately wrote him a letter of resignation and whatnot. For me, I didn't care, And now I even got a Native American church, and I get all the peyote. Matter of fact, I was acquiring more peyote than all the other Native American churches put together. Okay, so, and that really woke people up. Okay, that got NARF really pissed off because they are in charge of keeping the Native American church just to Indian reservations.
Right.
So
now, James, I just want to stop there for a second and just bring something up. When you started this church, it was and still is under the blessing of the Rosebud Reservation of the Lakota Sioux.
Oh, absolutely. That's the reason Salvador wanted me to have that, because one, he said, your dad or your grandfather's James Mooney, for God's sakes, that saved the entire American Native culture, and then Leslie Fullbull also blessed you, the most powerful Native American church or Native American roadman in the United States at that time.
Right.
And so I am more legitimate than anybody you could possibly think of. Right. That's where Salvador came from. Okay, so then I'm going on doing my whole thing, happy as a lark, and there's a lot of other things I could go into, but I'm just talking about the things that I think that your people are really, really interested in, okay? Right. And so I'm doing this peyote ceremonies and stuff, and we are, plus when I opened up the church, Oklevueha Native American Church, then the state of Utah fired me from the prison system because of political stuff, because of me developing the Native American Church,
right?
And because of NARF, okay? And so I ended up, I didn't start the lawsuit, but the a lady by the name of Mary Lee Peterson, that when the authorities of the prison went to her, because she's my direct supervisor, said, we want you to devise some kind of reasoning so we can fire James. And she refused to do that. He's a stellar employee. How can I do this? How can I do it? He's been honored by the governor as being a stellar employee and everything. And they ended up, because she would not write a bogus report, they got her supervisor to write the bogus report. So because she wouldn't write it, they made hell on her. And so when I got fired, then she ended up quitting because they made hell on her, and then she filed a civil action against them for firing me for illegitimate reasons, for made-up reasons, and also making life hell for her. And so I got a telephone call from her attorney. It was, and so I asked me if I would come there with Linda. And so I went to this law firm, and her name was Catherine Collard. And I got these three women, man. Mary Lee Peterson. I've got my wife and Catherine Collard, an attorney. And they said, they asked me to get on this civil action for Mary Lee Peterson. And I said, no, I've got no reason. want to sue anybody. And my wife and Mary Lee, my wife looked at me and said, "You mean to say you're not going to stand up for Mary Lee Peterson after she stood up for you?" Oh, and then Catherine, I got 3 women on me, man, and one is enough to sway me. and so, and so and so I ended up going on that civil action, and then and so there's something that goes on with. I'm not going to get into politics, but so I filed a civil action, okay, and that was and then before we settled, and Catherine Collard said one of the reasons they raided our church was to discredit me, so it could discredit the civil action. And so they raided our church. Now, that church was paid cash because I had a multimillionaire contribute $500,000 to me to buy this property. And so that's what I put on. So it was registered as a church in Utah County, the state of Utah, as Oklevueha Native American, Oklevueha Earthwalks Native American Church of Utah, Inc. That's what it's registered as, okay? Oh, I think about let's see, I formulated Oklevueha in 1987. We moved into that place in 1999. So we were there for about 6 months. We're taking heroin addicts off the street. We're giving unwed mothers a place to raise their children. We're helping inmates after they get out of prison to get jobs and a place to halfway houses. We had a house trailer that was in the back where people were going through withdrawals. They would stay there until they got through the withdrawals, and then we started doing. And we had a whole thing of a cabinet making shop where people could earn living, and then a running route around so they could. I mean, it was really beautiful what we had going. It's 5 acres, and all of a sudden I'm I'm doing something, and I get a phone call that we're being raided, and I said, "What?" Now, mind you, I've worked 7 years as undercover, so I know the laws on drugs, and I know I'm legal and everything. And the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000 was actually signed in law 2 months before this raid.
Right, so it gave even more legitimacy to what you was doing.
Yeah, and so I drove up. It was called that they were raiding, and sure enough, the full SWAT team, full raid, guns and everything, and right on my daughter's 10th birthday, and so my wife is taking all these kids, showing up and taking them up to her mother's house to have the birthday party. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Anyway, I walk up and I ask, "Who's in charge?" And so this guy named Robinson, and I says, "Robinson, let me see your warrant." And so he shows it to me. I said, I mean, mind you, I'm a cop, right? Or I'm undercover. I know what a warrant is, okay?
Right.
I look at it, and I say, "Robinson, this is an illegal warrant. This is not valid." He said, "What are you talking about?" "It's made out to James Mooney's residence. This is not my residence. This is a church." Stops everything. Calls up the law firm or the Utah County's offices, and they said, "Go ahead, forget that," because they're taking orders from NARF,
Right.
Native American Rights Fund. Okay, so I'm sitting down, and then I said, and you're not supposed to talk, okay? But me, I already know that there's nothing I could say that could be harmful to me because it's all in accordance with the law. So I'm talking down, and I tell Robinson, "You know something?" He says, "What?" "They just passed a law 2 months ago that is showing what you're doing is totally illegal." stops it again, goes all the way through the thing, comes back, they just ignore it. Remember what I said about what my great-grandfather said? That the only way you can practice this religion is if on your Indian reservations.
Right.
That bullshit kept on going up to 2005. And it's still going on, to be frank with you. Okay? Well, anyway, so now this is my arrogance about me, because that's probably one of the biggest things I've had to overcome is my arrogance. Okay? So he has all of our things, belongings of the church property, 12,000 peyote buttons, and all of our office equipment and stuff like that. And they're in a truck. And I go up to Robinson. I says, Robinson, this is your last chance. He looks at me and says, what do you mean, my last chance? I says, if you bring everything and put everything back, I'll just forget it. It'll mean nothing. But if you don't, you're going to make me a multimillionaire. Guess what's happening? Our church is already over $1 million.
Right.
Now, is that going to mean no?
No.
Because I don't give a crap about it. But the thing is, and you wait, it's just beginning. Just beginning. And so, and I know Robinson knows those things, and he's retired. And he says, man, did James know what was going on? I went to the county commissioner after that. And I said to the county commissioner, he's now the governor, Gary Herbert. And I said, Gary, you know, this is totally illegal. And he looked at me, he says, James, I know it. But there's nothing. I said, if the commissioners stepped in on it, this issue is so big, they would sue the county commissioners for interfering. So he couldn't do anything about it. Now, my attorney, Catherine Collard, ended up settling the thing with the prison system for $50,000. Okay, and she just wanted to get that out of the way so she could focus on this. And she said, we need to file a federal injunction before they arrest you, because they're going to arrest you.
Right.
And she failed to file that federal injunction until a day after we arrested. And then the federal court said, well, we'll just wait till the state finishes up on that. It just so. And so I went to Clifford J. And I said, Clifford, they raided our church and they arrested Linda and I. And he started laughing. I said, what the frick are you laughing about? He said, I told you that's what they would do if you took this medicine to the white man. The white man would arrest you, right? And I said, yeah, they did. Then I said, this I thought would really get them pissed. I said, they took at least 12,000 peyote buttons. He laughed some more. I said, what the heck are you laughing about? They took our most sacred things. And he says to me, he says, James, did that peyote clean you up? I said, yeah, I sure did. Well, now it's going to clean up the state of Utah. This is Clifford. And then I said, Clifford, this is no fairy tale. This is serious shit. I can go to prison for the rest of my life with my wife. That's what they want to do. They want to put us in prison for the rest of our life. And I don't have the money to do this. Then he got serious. He looked at me and he says, James, you don't need money. You've got our prayers. That's all you need. I walked away saying, excuse the term, but I said to myself, I'm fucked. Catherine Collard did a splendid job going against the state of Utah, NARF, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs and kicked their butt and got a unanimous decision from the Utah Supreme Court, and it didn't cost me a dime.
He knew what was going on.
I'm telling you, those elders, man, you damn well better listen to them because they know what they're doing. I mean, that first time well, not the first time, but when I really realized what was that I'm in a world that I don't understand. And that one of that time was with, well, there's another time, but the real thing was with Leslie Faubourg when he says, you need my help. How the hell did he know that?
It's because Spirit was speaking to him.
Something. I mean, at that time, it was just out of my realm of thinking. But I had other things with Clifford that blew me away, too. But that's not what I'm going to take this time up with and everything. So, there we go. You got this situation where we won unanimously. Okay, NARF is not giving up. So, do you know what a bill of attainder law is? Either one of you?
No, I do not.
No.
Okay, this is important for you to know. Okay. A bill of attainder law is a law that denies someone of their civil liberties. It can be one person or a group of people. Okay? All right. Now, I'm going to go backtrack a little bit. Okay? Now, when I started doing the medicine with Clifford Jake, and this is when Chief Little Dove blessed me as a medicine person for our tribe. I'm in southern Utah, about 1988, 89, and I'm marrying people. And these people in that community says, how can this savage Indian be marrying people? Like you were talking about earlier. And so they complained to the governor, Governor Michael Levin, who I also happen to know, and that's a story I won't get into. But the director of Indian Affairs is a name by Will Nakima. Will Nakima is a Hopi elder, and he's the one that got me to do sweat lodges inside the prison system. Now, what I'm going to share with you is legal stuff, but it is vital for you and people that truly want to understand the powers of Oklevueha Native American Church. This was very important information for you. Okay?
All right.
There's a number of laws of people, and Jeff Brofman was one of them, that financed certain laws to protect the rights of the Native American people to have their ceremonies, the use of peyote. And one was called ARFA, American Indian Freedom Act, okay? And another one's called RIFA, Religious Indian Freedom Act, okay? So these laws named a specific ceremony, sacrament, named a specific church, Native American Church, and stated that you are to be on Indian reservations and to be able to take peyote, and you have to be an Indian. Okay? All of these laws stated that. And RIFA came after ARFA because there were some problems they found with ARFA, and so they made an amendment to RIFA, or made it actually to a law called RIFA. Well, anyway, back about 1980 something, there was two Native American Church Indians that were counselors to a drug rehab center in Oregon. Well, this Oregon, the state of Oregon fired these two guys because they're using peyote. Okay, you can fire people for anything you want, but you can't deny them of their unemployment insurance. if it's done for racial discrimination.
Right.
So the Smith brothers, and you can look it up, it's called Smith versus Oregon, sued the state of Oregon for denying them of their unemployment insurance. They made their legal argument quoting ARFA and RIFA. When it went to the federal courts in Oregon, the Smiths won unanimously. NARF had Oregon appeal it to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. They won unanimously again, the Smith brothers. Then it went to then NARF got them to appeal it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. At the United States Supreme Court, they ruled ARFA and RIFA unconstitutional laws, and so the Smith brothers lost it. Because the RIFA and ARFA were Bill of Attainder laws. They were depriving other races and other people other than Indian reservations of their civil liberties to be able to partake of peyote. So they lost. Well, when they denied, when they ruled against them, it eliminated the government compelling interest standard for all religions. You know what government compelling interest standard is? You don't. This is an important thing for you to know.
We're getting an education tonight, Demian.
A government compelling interest standard is a statement saying in order to violate or to step on the properties or have anything to do or to arrest a person or a church, raid a church or arrest a religious leader, you have to prove to a court that they meet a government compelling interest standard. A government compelling interest standard, I don't know if you know it, but there was a Muslim cleric in New York about 10 or 15 years ago. He was blind, and he was building bombs to blow up things, you know, and he was arrested and prosecuted, and he's serving time now, okay, because the government could prove a government compelling interest. Not only could they prove that he was building a bomb, which is not unconstitutional. You can build a bomb. But they could prove that he met a government compelling interest standard because he was going to blow up buildings other than his own. Pretty high grade, right? Government compelling interest standard.
Yeah.
That's what protects the Catholic Church. That's what protects the Mormon Church. That's what protects the Jews. That's what protects all the religions from having any government interference into their religious practices. When they ruled against the Smith, they eliminated the government compelling interest standard for all religions. So, the Senate judiciary, and then the Supreme Court scolded the Senate for passing a Bill of Attainder law. And then, plus they eliminated the government compelling interest standard for everybody. So, the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the chairman, is a guy named Senator Orrin Hatch, a Mormon. Who's on his committee is a guy named Ted Kennedy, a Catholic, and a Jew named Lieberman. And they're saying, holy crap, instead of trying to eliminate this church, we've got to come to their aid. Because if we don't go to their aid, we're going to get screwed.
They're going to come after you.
So, the first thing I find out about this, because I didn't know any of this, all right, is my attorney, his name is Steve Taylor, gets a phone call from the Senate committee and tells about this story. And they need to get my story because the reason I'm doing sweat lodges in the prison system is because the state of Utah, the only state, the medicine people sued the state of Utah to allow us to have sweat lodges inside the prison system. Okay? And so they wanted to know me and know what the circumstances were. And then they tell my attorney the story I just got through telling you. And they said, we got two problems. One, how do we word something to protect peyote and the Native American Church without saying the Native American Church and peyote? How are we going to do that? We don't know. But the biggest problem we got is even if we word something, there's no way in the world we can get this to pass the House of Representatives and the Senate because of all the special interests. They're making billions and billions of dollars off of the suppression of the Native American Church.
Right.
So they left it with that. Okay? I told you about 1876, right? So what they did is they named the Native American Church in the heading of that law. Religious land use. Only one religion has the spirituality that cannot be separated from the earth.
Right.
Only one religion has a problem getting their ceremonies into prison systems. Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000. Does that make sense to you guys?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So the next thing they've had in the law was reinstituting the government compelling interest standard to protect everybody.
Okay.
But now we still have peyote, right?
Correct.
We've got the Native American Church, but we don't have the thing with peyote. So the second thing they put in there outside of reinstituting the government compelling interest standard is interstate commerce with other countries, other states, and Indian reservations. Because peyote does not grow and is not distributed everywhere. It has to come from another country or from a state to Indian reservation. So they named peyote. That means you can pass and transport ayahuasca, peyote, cannabis, international, and the United States mail has to protect you. Now, but they got that problem. How are they going to pass this from the House of Representatives and the Senate? There's no way they're going to be able to pass that along like they did ARFA and RIFA.
Right.
So you know what they did? In all reality, RLUIPA, Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, is an amendment to RIFA. And an amendment only has to be secured by the Senate Judiciary Committee. It passes it on to the President Clinton at that time, and he signed it into law.
Right.
So now you understand some things.
Yeah.
Now, NARF comes after. So what happens after the Utah Supreme Court ruling, the Attorney General, I'm not going to use names, okay? I'm not going to use any names. The Utah Attorney General's office, NARF, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but the Bureau of Indian Affairs and NARF supported the Attorney General to go to the state legislature of Utah to pass a bill of attainder law stating a pure lie, saying the Utah Supreme Court ruling showed that the state of Utah is out of step with federal laws. And so they ended up formulating a bill of attainder law after the Utah Supreme Court ruling. Okay, that passed the House and the Senate. Okay, the governor at that time was a governor, John Huntsman, who ended up being the ambassador to Russia and China. Really a neat guy, okay, but very much of a politician. He was out of town when that thing was supposed to be signed. His lieutenant governor, Gary Herbert, who was the county commissioner 10 years earlier, who said this was all illegal, what was being done, he's now the lieutenant governor. He advises Huntsman, this is an illegal law. This shouldn't be signed. Huntsman says, go ahead and sign it. It's his boss. So he signed it into law. Now, there's only 2 states in the entire United States that have a bill of attainder laws on the Native American Church. Idaho and Utah. Idaho, Attorney General at that time was a guy named Larry Echohawk. A family member of him is John Echohawk, who started NARF, Native American Rights Fund, in 1973. Larry Echohawk was a director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So you can understand how that bill of attainder came along.
Right.
Totally illegal, okay?
Right.
So shortly after they did that, okay, made the bill of attainder laws, I get a letter from the federal government saying that they're thinking about indicting Linda and I said, saying that I'm a fraud and I got a Native American church illegally, and it's all BS, okay? But somebody was talking to the state attorney general's office and said, how can you do that? You know what they said? Because we can. Unbelievable. I mean, unfreaking believable. So I write Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch, when we won the Utah Supreme Court, texted me in congratulations, okay? And I said to Orrin, I said, how in the living hell am I going to stand up to the federal government? Again, okay? And this time, I mean, we're talking about federal charges, man. 13 of them. And each one could keep both Linda and I in prison for the rest of our lives. I write Orrin Hatch, and he writes me back and says, have faith in the system, James.
It's going to say a system that's been coming after you repeatedly.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
That sounds like a lot to ask.
So, we're arrested. Linda and I are arrested. Okay? And I mean, I'm really concerned. I said, there's an attorney in, his name is Ron Yingage. He's a top attorney. I know him, and etc. And I'm familiar with him. And I said to him, or I asked the people, get a hold of Ron, because I got to have the best attorney on this, because these guys are coming after me like you have no idea. And we're coming up the elevators. Linda and I are in jumpsuits and handcuffs, and I mean, and we go we're coming up the elevator, and I said to Linda, I said, if we don't have Ron Yangage there, sweetheart, I don't know what we're going to do, because this is bigger than I ever thought we'd ever be. Well, anyway, we come in, and this little gal, cutest gal, blonde, and she comes up to me, and there's this place that's full of newspaper people. It is jam-packed. The marshals are going nuts. And this is a preliminary hearing or whatever it is. And the first time we're in front of a federal court. And this little sweet blonde girl comes up to me and says, Mr. Mooney, my name is Christine Angelos, and I'm with da 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 da. I'm in shock, to be frank with you. And I says, well, that's not. And she says, I'm here to represent you. I look at her and I said, and this is what I said, sweetheart, I got a daughter older than you. These people are out to crucify me, man. This is no good fun and games. And I said, I'm looking for Ron Yayage. And she says, well, James, you can have, or Mr. Mooney, you can have anybody you would like, but you need to know something. Okay, what do I need to know? Sitting in this courtroom right now, there are 3 attorneys and 3 investigators here to assist you in protecting you. And I just thought she was full of hot air. And so I sat down, and they're sitting. Linda's sitting right next to me, which is making the marshals going crazy. And Linda's sitting right next to this big, tall woman, and I did notice that. And so I'm sitting, and the judge, Abba, the federal judge, starts asking me, saying, these are your charges, and this is what you're looking at. And after he did that, and he said, do you understand that? I said, yeah. Then he asked me something. And this is really important, what I'm going to say to you. I had no idea how important this was until later on. The judge asked me, he says, do you have a job, James, or Mr. Mooney? And I look at him, I said, a job? I'm a medicine man. I don't have a job. So he says, well, okay, you're indigent, and here's your attorneys. I have 3 attorneys and 3 investigators already waiting for me. And he says, those are your attorneys. He goes to Linda and she does the same things. And then when she says, no, she doesn't have a job or doesn't have enough money, then he assigned this tall lady, a $400 an hour attorney, is sitting right next to her. We leave the courtroom because they're now going to do investigation because it's federal to see if we're an escape, or by danger to society or whatever it is. And so they cart us out, and my wife's brother goes up to the woman and says, how did you know to be here? Because he'd been in court and having an attorney already there. She says, the judge called me last night and they had me be here to represent Linda. I get out of jail, okay, 3 weeks later, and there's a story to that too. But anyway, I get out of jail, and it so happens that the court person that oversees me and everything, he and I went to cop school together. And so we're talking cop stories for first hour and say, oh crap, we gotta get down to business here, James. And I said, oh sure, let's do it. And he says, I got a couple of things I need to tell you. He says, number one is that if you should be convicted by any chance, you will not serve 1 day in jail. So what? You will not serve 1 day in jail. He says that's one thing. Another thing is when I turn in a report that a person is safe to be released, I've been accepted every time. The judge accepts everything. They did his. And I'm not going to go into that story, okay? It took me 3 weeks to get out, okay? And it was an ordeal. And the third thing he says, James, there are some powers that want you to go down. And they have set up the most strictest, not parole, but court release, more so than anything I've ever experienced. But we have got to follow it by the letter because they are going to go after you. And sure enough, they try to falsify something. And if I hadn't kept accurate records, they would have put Linda in jail. And they wanted Linda in jail more so than me because then she, if she plea bargained or got me to plea bargain to protect her, that's what they were trying to do. They made hell on her.
Right.
because they call it, in the legal thing, they call it hostage taking. You get her, you come to the guy, say, we'll drop all charges on your wife, and as long as you plea bargain.
Right.
And so they made hell on her to make it so that she would want a plea bargain. But Linda wouldn't do it because she just said, we haven't done anything wrong. I mean, so really, this stand is really Linda and I. I mean, we both, because if she won't decided to plea bargain, I would have done it on a dime. Because my wife is more important than anything else. But so she did. She did that. So anyway, so this type thing, I had to do 3 UAs a week unannounced. I mean, I had to have my Civil War gun that doesn't even shoot taken out of my house. I had to have my bow and arrows taken out of the house. And I mean, we were on the strictest thing, couldn't leave the count or the state for 6 months. That's what we had to live with. And Linda was on the same kind of thing. Okay, but not as strict on the DEA. Plus, which is really unusual, I had to go to a psychiatrist for I don't know how many months, okay? And that's because of the Vietnam stuff. They thought maybe I gone off anyway. I don't want to get into all that stuff. But anyway, that's what that was about, was see if I'm still safe or if I'm gone crazy or something, because they knew my CIA or my history is what
Right.
amounted to. So anyway, I go to my attorney. It's called Utah Federal, oh, Utah Federal. Oh my gosh! What? Anyway, it's um, the government Utah Federal Defender's Office. How could I forget that? Beyond me. But anyway, I'm with this government federal defender's office, and I go in, and they got a room called Mooney's War Room, and I'm introduced to actually almost all of I mean, there was a room full of attorneys. Okay, come to find out what happened, and the reason they were doing that, Orrin Hatch went to the Senate Judiciary Committee and said, to prosecute somebody, we have all the money in the world. To defend James Mooney, he has got to have unlimited amount of funds. 6 months. They took the one set of attorneys and investigators, one investigator and one attorney did the research work on the Utah Supreme Court ruling. They went through that whole thing. Another one, a set, attorney and investigator, did the research work on the federal indictments. And another set was designed to truly study my indigenous background and see if I was the real thing.
Right.
After 6 months, they found out James Mooney was authentic, but they found out that the federal government has been complicit in denying the Native American Church of its civil liberties. So I'm called in, and I are called in with all these attorneys begging us to sign a document that we're willing to have all the charges dropped before an evidential hearing. This is a federal evidential hearing. They have it all dropped because they don't want all this information that my attorneys discovered to become part of federal court records.
Right, because then it's a smoking bullet against them, or the smoking gun
Oh,
against them. It's
oh,
it's the bullet
it
that would take
should.
them down.
It could discredit our entire judicial system
Right.
because they have been complicit in denying a Native American church of its civil liberties since 1918. It's big stuff, guys.
That's huge
Big
stuff.
stuff. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Plus, they got documentation that the DEA or the federal government lied in a federal court hearing and also falsified a document to get the indictments in the first place from a federal grand jury. That's all there. I've got all the records because they gave me all of the records of what the prosecution had got, what my defense attorneys had got, and it's all stored at the University of Utah Marriott Library. You can get to it all online, I guess. Now.
Dave
So-
just responded in chat. Talk about the power of the ancestors.
Okay, now this is and he's right because guess what I did because of Clifford Jake telling me you don't have to worry because you have my prayers. Okay, when I found out Steve Kilpack was the director of about 40 attorneys or a whole bunch of people, I went to Steve and I said, Steve, right at the first day or first week or whatnot, and I said, I need a list of everybody in your office. Can I get a list of everybody? And he did. He supplied me a list. I took that list. I took Linda's pipe and my pipe. Took 2 days, and hiked to the highest mountaintop of the Wasatch Range called Mount Nebo, and did a prayer pipe ceremony with my wife's pipe and my pipe for these people, asking the ancestors to come in and help. The power of prayer, guys.
Oh, yeah. One thing that people don't realize is when we reach out to the ancestors, they do answer and they do move, and they move in ways and forces that no man can stop.
So get this really, really strongly. All the powers of these special interests. It's billions and billions of dollars.
Right.
They first came at me with the state of Utah. And they got their asses kicked. Then they used their illegitimate, illegal processes with the federal government. And then they got their asses kicked. Don't mess around with those elders, man.
Nope, those ancestors will always stand firm.
As long as
That's
you
right.
remain righteous.
What?
As long as you remain righteous.
You're exactly right. You got to maintain that because, and I got to say something to you. I've had numerous elders. Now I've talked to you about 3, but even those 3. I forgot to tell you, Chief Littledale, 4 elders telling me to take these medicines to the white man. Okay, but I've had others. Almost every one of them said very strongly in ceremony, anybody that comes after you, woe be unto them. And that Attorney General of the state of Utah, he was indicted. I mean, every one of them, every one of those people have been, not because of me, because I went to every one of those attorney generals and I prayed in front of their offices saying, I have no ill feelings. Anything bad that comes to you, it's got nothing to do with me. Because I don't care. I did that with the Attorney General of the state of Utah, and I did it to the Utah County Attorney General. And I just, because I don't want that on my shoulders.
Right.
But man, they both, oh my gosh, what has happened to them is unbelievable.
I don't know about
And
you. I don't know about you, Demian, but what he just said there just gave me goosebumps and chills.
Yeah.
So anyway, guys, that's Oklevueha Native American Church.
That's the history of our church.
That's
It's
it.
it's it's a warrior foundation, spiritual warrior foundation.
It's
And I've always
exactly what it
considered
is.
it. I've always considered it a lot to live up to, but that's
You
what we're
just
here
know.
for.
You just know your actions. Okay, make sure it's by the Spirit. And the Tarahumars and the Richolis told me that every breath you take is a prayer.
Yes.
You stay in prayer and know that you're representing millions of people that have sacrificed their lives so you can do what you're doing.
It's a lot to live up to, but it is an honor to be part of
But,
it.
but that's what it amounts to. And if you go and you walk in prayer and you keep in mind that you're representing those people that have sacrificed so much, they're not going to let you down, man.
Every time I go into ceremony, I have a little thing I say every time I go into ceremony, every time I get ready to take sacraments, and it's something I don't even know if I've shared it with you, Demian. But I always say, from the head to the heart to my lips, if it is spoken, so may it be true.
You're describing exactly the conscious to the subconscious to the body.
Yeah, I believe my belief. This is my belief. Is that the Spirit will always touch your heart, and your mind will assist in getting what the heart has inspired it to do. But if you get your head turned around, oh, then you're in trouble. And that's been my biggest challenge. Arrogance has been my biggest challenge. But you get that, and I'm still working on it. As soon as I get that feeling in my spirit, my brain argues.
Mm-hmm.
It does. It just argues. And then eventually it's a little more, it's a lot easier now, but it's been really challenging for me to follow the Spirit because my head wants to get in.
And I understand exactly what that feels like, but I also know that it's easy to argue with myself, but I'm not going to argue with my wife. I know what because if I pay attention to her, I know she's not going to lead me astray.
I'm surprised we're not hearing Tina laugh off camera.
Yeah, this is something that I really take at home. It says, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Yeah,
and I just man, happiness is where I'm going to be all the time. And as soon as I start to argue, I just go yep. But anyway, but I think Linda would say I'm still learning, but nevertheless, I have my intent.
As long as you're still alive, as long as you're still drawing breath, you know you have a lot to learn.
Well, it's a little bit different. My life right now, guys, is so beautiful. I get what I want, when I want it, how I want it, where I want to do it, who I want. I am living a life that is unfreaking believable. I have so many grandkids. My grandkids, it's my grandkids, some golf, some fishing, and usually golf with my grandkids and fishing with my grandkids, and completing the unending honey-do list items I have around the house.
Yeah.
That's my life. And man, as long as I get a couple of those things done, holy heck, it is beautiful for me.
You're blessed.
It's really a beautiful place to be. So guys, next time when we get together on the third one, we'll talk about we'll talk about the objectives and the things, what Oklevueha is really about.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And I've already covered that a little bit, but I'll get into it. And I got to tell you, I wouldn't be able to get what I want for Oklevueha if it wasn't for the Council of Advisors, because they've made it possible because of what their vetting systems. We're authentic. We're authentic. And we're the only authentic Native American churches off of Indian reservations. And the reason we're authentic is because of that vetting system, that when people get a part of Oklevueha, they know they're going to get hooked up with people that have been vetted.
Right.
And they're going to be with branches that are truly holding their own. Because if they're not living the standards, they're gone.
Right.
And they don't hesitate. It is done fast. So anyway, God bless, guys. See you next time.
Thank you so much for being here, James. If you
yeah,
guys want to hang
it's
on
an
for
honor.
just a few minutes after I end the stream, I wouldn't mind chatting with you guys for just a couple minutes afterwards. Just say
Sure.
some thank yous and everything. So
Sure thing.
everybody, thank you for coming out tonight. Once again, we are so honored to have James Flaming Eagle Mooney with us, the co-founder of the Oklevueha Native American Church, and sharing his wisdom and his knowledge with us. It has been such a blessing. Demian, as always, you've been a reoccurring guest on Breaking Reality, and it's always great to have you. We always get into some great conversations and stuff, and it's always an amazing time. I just want to say thank you both for being here tonight, and we will be back next Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time with James, and we're going to continue on, and we're going to be talking about what the goals and what the purpose and the reasons for Oklevueha Native American Church is. So
Wonderful.
go ahead and join us then, and thank you everybody, and we'll see you later.